Thank you for watching my Technology in the Classroom series. This week we will be discussing how copyright and fair use apply to your life in and out of school, and how you can use copyrighted materials correctly and legally under fair use. Copyright is defined by dictionary.com as, quote, the exclusive right to make copies, license, and otherwise exploit a literary, musical, or artistic work, whether printed, audio, video, etc. Works granted such right by law on or after January 1st, 1978 are protected for the lifetime of the author or creator and for a period of 50 years after his or her death. Basically, what copyright means is that you own the original work that you create. Other people have to ask you for permission to use it and change it, and you have to ask other people for permission to use and change their work too. Copyright is intended to protect the creators of original work, but it is also intended to encourage people to create new work as well. Think about it. If you knew that every time you created something new, like a piece of music or a painting or a novel, and you copyrighted those things so that you could sell them, but that other people have then taken your work and created something from it or used it without asking your permission, would you be motivated to make more of that work? Copyright isn't just intended to protect the profits of, for example, record and movie companies. It's intended to protect the work of anything created originally and encourage people to create and invent more things in the future. However, copyright law also has provisions for teachers and students under what is known as fair use. Fair use in U.S. copyright law, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a legal doctrine that portions of copyrighted materials may be used without permission of the copyright owner, provided the use is fair and reasonable, does not substantially impair the value of the materials, and does not curtail the profits reasonably expected by the owner. What this means is that teachers and students are allowed to use some or all of copyrighted material as long as it is used for educational purposes. I'm sure you're asking at this point, what can I use and how can I use it if I'm allowed to use it? Well, in the next portion, I'll go over the types of copyrighted media that teachers and students can use and how much you can actually get away with. First, let's talk about print material. All of us at one time or another used printed materials in classes. Here are the rules that govern their use. First, let's talk about specific rules, and then I'll go into some generalizations. You can use a poem that is less than 250 words, or you can use a 250-word excerpt of a poem that is greater than 250 words. You can use articles, stories, or essays that are less than 2,500 words. You can use an excerpt from a longer work, like 10% of a work or 1,000 words, whichever is less. You can use one chart, picture, diagram, or cartoon per book or periodical. And you can use 2 pages maximum from an illustrated work that is less than 2,500 words, like a children's book. Teachers can use multiple copies of things for classroom use and incorporate it into multimedia projects for their classes. Students can incorporate text into multimedia projects as well. Copies may be made only from legally acquired originals, and there can only be 1 copy per student. Teachers may make copies in 9 instances per class per term only, and usage must be, quote, at the instance and inspiration of a single teacher. In other words, a principal or an administrator can't tell all of the teachers at their school to copy everything from one book. Nobody is allowed to create anthologies, and consumables, and this is important, such as workbooks, may not be copied. Consumables, as they're used, need to be purchased again. Next, let's talk about print material for archiving purposes. Uh, Not only librarians archive things, teachers can archive things as well, and students can actually archive things to a certain degree. You can archive an entire work or portions of a work in which the existing format has become obsolete, like a document produced and stored on an Apple IIc. And in general, if you do this, the copies must contain copyright information. Archiving rights are designed to allow libraries to share with other libraries. That's where this really came from. And archiving is really good because it's a good way to preserve one-of-a-kind and out-of-print books. Next, let's talk about illustrations and photographs. Illustrations and photographs are everywhere on the internet, as you already know, and I'm sure at one point you have shared a photograph you've taken with your friends. Did you know that any photograph you take is automatically copyrighted as soon as you take it? As students, you are allowed to use photographs and illustrations in your schoolwork, but as with other forms of material, there are rules you must follow under fair use if you're going to use someone else's work. This applies to teachers too. Of course, illustrations and photographs apply to this, as well as collections of photographs and collections of illustrations. Single works may be used in their entirety, but you can't use more than 5 images produced by a single artist or photographer. You can use things from a collection, but you can't use more than 15 images or 10%, whichever is less, from an entire collection. Although older illustrations may be in the public domain and don't need permission to be used, sometimes they're part of a copyright collection, so you need to check. Copyright ownership information is available at the Library of Congress or at the Music Publishers Organization of the United States. Next, let's talk about the 2 kinds of video that you can use in your classes and on projects. I'm sure at some point you've seen a video used in one of your classes to supplement a topic you were working on, and your teacher probably knew about this too. But have you ever wondered if this violated copyright laws? Well, guess what? Video is absolutely allowed to be used in the classroom, but there are differences between viewing a video and using a video in a project. Okay, first, let's talk about viewing things in the classroom. Videotapes and video can only be viewed in the classroom if they're purchased or rented, and you can also use DVDs and laser discs if they're still lying around. Teachers can use these materials in the classroom, of course, and copies may be made for archival purposes to replace lost, damaged, or stolen copies. Specifically, the material must be legitimately acquired. It can't be bootlegged, and material must be used in a classroom or in a non-profit environment for, quote, dedicated to face-to-face instruction. In other words, it needs to be used in a classroom again. Use should be instructional and not for entertainment or reward. So if your teacher shows you a movie on the last day of class, that's actually violating copyright. And copyright is okay only if replacements of videos are unavailable at a fair price or in a format that can be used. Next, let's talk about video that you can use for multimedia or video projects. Again, these are videotapes, DVDs, laserdiscs, multimedia encyclopedias, QuickTime movies, and mostly video clips from the internet, which I'm sure teachers and students are interested in because YouTube is a very valuable resource at this point. Students can, quote, may use portions of lawfully acquired copyright works in their academic multimedia, and this is defined as 10% of the work or 3 minutes, whichever is less, in a project that involves motion media. Specifically, the material must be legitimately acquired, a legal copy, again, not a bootleg or a home recording, and copyright works must, included in multimedia projects, must give proper attribution to the copyright holder. In other words, you need to cite your work. Again, give credit where credit is due. Next, let's talk about music in multimedia and video projects. I'm sure if you've made a PowerPoint presentation or a video with your classmates or something for your classes, you've wanted to use music. Well, this is where it gets kind of tricky. Of course, you can use records, cassette tapes, CDs, and audio clips that are on the web. Teachers and students both can only use up to 10% of a copyrighted musical composition, and that only that can be reproduced, performed, and displayed as part of a multimedia program produced by an educator or students. Okay, you can't use entire songs. A maximum of 30 seconds per musical composition may be used, and a multimedia program must have an educational purpose. Again, keep in mind, even if you own the music on your computer, you are not allowed to use the entire song in any project that you use or present to your classes. Next, let's talk about television. Occasionally, teachers will want to show clips from broadcasts that are relevant to a topic they're discussing in classes. These are a little bit harder to come by, but they can still be used. It depends on where you get them from. First, they can be a broadcast. In America, of course, there's ABC, NBC, CBS, UPN, PBS, Fox, any of the local stations. But if there's a cable channel, you can still use things from channels like CNN and MTV and HBO. And you can use videotapes made of the broadcasts in cable TV programs. In general, broadcasts or tapes may only be used for instruction, of course, and cable channel programs may only be used with permission. Many programs may be retained by teachers for years, but if you have any questions on this one, refer to Cable in the Classroom. That's a good website that you can look at and get the rules for that. Specifically, schools are allowed to retain broadcast tapes for a minimum of 10 school days. Basically, television stations don't want schools archiving programs and don't want them archiving news and things like that. So really, if you think about it, it's sort of like a one-shot deal. If you use it in your classes to teach a class, or if you use it as a project, if you're a student, you have to get rid of it after a certain amount of time. Cable programs are technically not covered, again, by the same guidelines as broadcast television, so you have to ask for permission, and again, check Cable in the Classroom. Next, let's talk about computer software. And I'm sure everybody knows that movies and music are definitely some of the most stolen material on the internet today. Well, computer software is right up there. In an educational setting, in other words, in school, schools can't get away with using copies of computer software. The software has to be purchased and it has to be licensed. Librarians can lend software to patrons, and software may be installed on multiple machines and distributed to users via a network, but it has to be a closed network, so like a computer lab in a school. The software may be installed at home and at a school, and this kind of applies to learning online. And libraries may make copies for archival use to replace lost, damaged, or stolen copies if software is unavailable at a fair price or in a viable format. Specifically, only one machine at a time may use a program, and a number of simultaneous users must not exceed the number of licenses. And the number of machines being used must never exceed the number licensed as well. This can be confusing, but basically, one person per computer with licensed software. A network license may be required for multiple users, so you'll have to check that if you're a teacher at your school. Take aggressive action to monitor that copying is not taking place. If you see a teacher or a student or anybody copying computer software, this is illegal. So keep your eyes open, and if you see anything, tell a teacher. Next, let's talk about downloading things from the internet. This is a big deal because students and teachers these days might not be completely clear on what you can use from the internet. Well, this is pretty simple. Images may be downloaded for student projects and teacher lessons, obviously, and sound files and video may be downloaded for use in multimedia projects. And for the rules on that, refer to the previous portions of this video that talk about music and video use. Specifically, resources from the web may not be reposted onto the internet without permission. However, links to legitimate resources can be posted. Any resources you download must have been legitimately acquired by the website you download it from. Refer to my previous video on how to check the legitimacy of websites. If you're downloading things from a website like Pirate Bay, that's not legal. If you want to stay legal, it's a good idea to visit a website called Creative Commons. And Creative Commons basically is a nonprofit organization that finds material or refers people to material on the web that has been cleared of copyright restrictions. In other words, you can find material for your projects on Creative Commons and you don't have to worry about violating copyright law. So if you go to creativecommons.com, what you want to do if you're searching for material is you want to go down to the lower portion of the page. And as you'll see right there, there is a search box that says find CC material. For the sake of this video, I typed in animal clip art. Now, the search box can be treated like a general Google word search. You might have to change the words you use to find the things you need. But in this case, I typed in animal clip art because what it'll do is it will allow me to not only find pictures of animals, but it will allow me to find maybe drawings, not only photographs, but drawings and paintings and different things like that. When I search for it, what Creative Commons does is it sends me to a larger page with different websites that are offering things that I can use. In this case, what I did is I went ahead and clicked on Flickr. And if you don't know about Flickr, it's already a popular website run by Google where people can post anything they want, usually images that they photographed. And amateur and professional photographers will generally use this to try and get their names out there and try to sell different things. Well, and so I click on Flickr and I come up with this page. And this page shows, as I mentioned, it's got drawings of animals and photographs of animals. It's got some quotes and other things that might not be relevant, but it's at least I'm going in the right direction. So I find a picture of a bird for this example, and it looks like a good picture of a bird, so I go ahead and click on it. This takes me to a page on Flickr run by a woman named Heather. She doesn't really give that much information about herself, but if I click on her name, it will actually send me to a different page which gives a little bit better name for her, which is Heather SB. Well, anyway, so I want to use this photograph. Now, don't take a screenshot of this. Don't try and drag this photograph anywhere. You want to actually legitimately download it. But first, what you need to do is you need to check if there are some rights that are still reserved. In other words, the photographer or creator of a work may still have limitations on how you can use that work. So you can click on some rights reserved and it'll take you to this page. And this shows how Heather has designated her picture for how you can use it. So it's got portions where it says, okay, you can copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format, and you can adapt. In other words, you can change, transform, and build upon the material, but she wants you to give her credit for doing it. So, as we said before, give credit where credit's due. I'm going to use this photograph, but at the same time, I'm going to give credit to Heather SB for this work. Next, I can download it. So I can go ahead and download it and put it on my computer. So I will click on the download button and put it on my computer. Now, this is sort of a general rule of thumb. After I get done making a video, what I'll do is I'll just clean off all of the photographs or images that I've saved for a particular video. I do this not only to not clog up my hard drive, but I don't really necessarily want to run into any issues in the future in case Heather comes back and changes the copyright on it. definitely things like that. So, be careful, clean stuff off your computer, be tidy. All right, you're an expert now. You know all about copyright and fair use as they apply to teachers and students. And so now you can go ahead and go forth and make all the multimedia visual projects you want. Good luck and happy crafting.